And forgot to hit record. Sorry, I forgot to hit record, so I'll redo that real quick. My name is Cody Burrington. I'm with Missouri State University. I'm the training coordinator for the Public Safety Training Center and also non-credit programs here at the university. Aerobotics LLC, Rick and Amy Cassida, reached out to me about 6 months ago on developing a course for flying drones for public safety and also for the Part 107 remote pilot certification. This webinar here is for that certification. So we'll go ahead and get started and go through some of the things that are covered in the course and also on the test.
Hello, everyone. I am Amy Cassida. I am an instructor at Aerobotics, and just a little bit about us. When the FAA instilled the rules saying that you had to register drones, and then thus commercial pilots needed to start getting their licenses, we actually saw the need that people are going to need help getting through these exams. And so we, while we do all sorts of, drone flights for real estate agents and other agencies, we focus on the educational aspect of getting your remote pilot's license. That seems to be what's near and dear to our hearts. And so we have spent a lot of time putting together information regarding that. This little webinar that we're doing, we are talking about the Part 107, so some of the requirements for that. But I'm going to go through more of the rules regarding just registering your drone and whether you would register it recreationally or commercially. We'll talk about some of that stuff. And then some of the things about the exam itself. At the end, we're going to open up to questions. If you are getting ready to take your test, you have a question about some aspect of something that you don't understand, more than happy to explain whatever we can to you. Or if you just had questions about the test itself, like the process of how it all works, again, more than happy to explain whatever questions you have, and we can do that at the end. Also, we did bring a few of our drones with us here. While we're not going to focus too much on the drones itself, I have a little section distinguishing the differences between them. We are, if you had technical questions, Rick Cassida, my husband, is here, and he is the man that knows pretty much everything about all the technical aspects regarding UAS. So if you have questions regarding that, feel free to ask those as well. All right? So we are going to be rolling. So since we started this company, we obviously have a lot of discussions about UAS. People come and talk to us all the times about them. And we hear a lot of crash stories. People come and tell us their stories about how they crashed their drone. We hear a lot of people explain to us that they flew their drone out of line of sight. A lot of times they'll use the first-person view goggles and fly farther than they should in restricted or prohibited airspace above the 400-foot level. We've heard stories about people spying or peeping or flying over people, spooking animals, and flying at night. But what we hear the most is that people aren't registering their UAS with the FAA, and or they're not getting their commercial remote pilot's license with the FAA to operate a commercial drone legally. So that is probably the two things we hear the most. And we kind of take it upon ourselves because we feel it's so important. We don't want to see anyone get in trouble, or be unsafe. So we do a lot of things like this webinar to try and get the word out on, the rules and how to manage in this new era of UAS. Okay? So the big overwhelming thing you need to know is that not knowing the rules is not an excuse for not following them. And I have a couple little stories here about that, but it is very important that if you are going to fly a UAS, be it recreationally or commercially, that you know the rules pertaining to flight. So just a couple stories. In 2015, which is really only 3 short years ago, an individual flew his UAS over the White House and crashed it onto the White House lawn. And the White House obviously went into lockdown. There are a few places within the United States where you absolutely cannot fly. The White House is one of them. Camp David is another. I believe Mount Rushmore is on there, and the Statue of Liberty also. Just places where aircraft cannot go, put a big period at the end of that. So that person was flying in a restricted area. In February of 2016, a man was arrested because he flew his drone up by the Empire State Building in New York City, and he flew it up to the 40th floor, and then it hit the side of the building and fell down to the 35th floor. Police were called, and he was arrested. He did end up pleading guilty to disorderly conduct, but he was flying over people, big giant no-no, and above 400 feet. In October 2015, 2 gentlemen out in Hollywood, California, were using their drone to spy on people, and they ended up hitting power lines in Hollywood, California, and knocked the power out to 600 to 700 customers. Those 2 gentlemen ended up getting charged, and I think at least one of them served some jail time for that. September 2017, a gentleman standing out on Long Island Sound took his he had a Phantom, like a Phantom 2 or a Phantom 3, I can't remember which. He flew that out over the water in Long Island Sound, out of line of sight. During the flight, he had flown his drone above 400 feet, but he ended up hitting a Black Hawk helicopter. At the time of the actual collision, he was not above 400 feet, but he had that day flown at above 400 feet. The one of the engines on the Phantom ended up being lodged into the Black Hawk helicopter, and thankfully the helicopter was able to land safely. And when it did land, they were able to pull that engine out, and people recognized it as a Phantom engine, so they took that and sent it off to DJI. They got warrants or whatever, found out who the owner of that drone was, and then went and visited the man, who had no idea what even happened to his drone. It just didn't come back as far as he was concerned. He thought maybe it crashed into the water. He had no idea what the rules were. I keep a constant eye on this case because while it is a year old, I'm waiting to see what the end result is for this man. So as time's ticking by here, things are becoming more serious, and incidences like this, I mean, he literally could have killed a couple people that were in the helicopter, or if the helicopter landed on houses on Long Island Sound, it could have been really, really bad. So I keep an eye on that to see how that one turns out. But things like this are happening all the time. Just even a couple weeks ago, someone flew a drone up by the Millennium Tower in San Francisco. If you're unfamiliar with that tower, they built it and it has been sinking and leaning. And most recently, a couple weeks ago, one of the panes in it cracked, one of the windows cracked. So they sent a drone up to see what the crack, what the building looked like up there. And for some reason, it lost its signal with the drone lost its signal, and it ended up dropping and it fell all the way to the ground. I think it was up on the 36th floor, and no one was injured, but it did end up crashing into the ground. And so they're investigating that. Just so you're aware, the FAA recognizes that 80% of aircraft accidents are human error accidents and not technical or mechanical accidents. So when you're looking at these, that is the biggest thing you need to know, is that 80% of the accidents that are happening are avoidable, having to do with human error. So when we look at training and we look at getting our pilot's license, our remote pilot's license, a lot of effort is spent making sure that people are educated and know what the rules are and know how to fly safely. So just know, when you operate a drone within the United States, it is your responsibility to understand and abide by the rules. Not knowing is not an excuse. So real quick, we're going to run through this. And that is, what constitutes a drone, and that would be any unmanned aircraft or ship guided by a remote control. All right, so examples of such would be a child's toy, like a remote controlled quadcopter. The ROV that just found the Titanic, that's also considered a drone, an underwater drone. The military Reaper, it's multi-million-dollar, also a drone. So you can see that the word drone constitutes a wide variety of remote operated unmanned vehicles. All right, so a couple pictures of some. This one down here on the bottom left is a Mavic Pro. We have one sitting here on the table. It's it's right here. That's the Mavic Pro. So just a couple of those. So I think when we talk about the words drone, and everyone recognizes that name, and you say, I bought a drone, I have a drone. Everyone understands what it is that they're talking about. But realistically, the drones that we are flying, such as this Phantom and that Mavic Pro over there, they really actually fall into the category of unmanned aircraft systems. This is what FAA has termed and deemed what they're going to call these drones that we're flying here. There's other names. A lot of people call them unmanned aircraft vehicles or UAV, also completely cool. There's some other names like the remotely operated vehicle. Those are the underwater ones for the most part. Unmanned ground vehicle, UGV. Obviously, those are rolling across the ground. But if you're going to fly a drone up into the air, it's probably best if we all start calling it what the FAA has picked as the name they want to use, which is unmanned aircraft system. Second choice being unmanned aircraft vehicle. I would say one of those two is probably the best way to go. So let's talk a little bit about the categories of UAS that there are. So the first one is toys, right? Toys are inexpensive. They're $14 to $150. We have a little one up here on the table. It's like right over here, this little yellow and black one. I can pick it up. It's super tiny, like this, right? Super, super little. Can you guys see it? I'm not sure where the camera is. So this thing weighs almost nothing, but sometimes they'll weigh about 8 grams. Short flight time, batteries don't hold much charge, so 7 to 8 minutes. They'll fly about 30 meters, not very far. The great thing about these little guys is that they are completely inexpensive. They don't go very far or not very high, but they do teach individuals the basic controls of operating a UAS, right? And some of them, like this little guy here, I think he was like $12 or he was less than $20. I can't even remember, but sometimes you can find him for like $12 or $15. Some of them, if you go a little more expensive, you might find one that has a camera on it. Might not be a great camera, but a basic camera. But these are the kind of UAS that will actually teach you how to operate the controls, right? So a good starting place. The next is the mid-range or consumer grade. A lot of DJI, Parrot, Unique, if these names sound familiar to you. These guys are a little bigger. They're 2.5 to 3 pounds. Fly a little longer because they have better batteries on them. They can fly up to like a little over a mile in range. And depending on, because $80 to $700 is, again, a wide range, you can end up having a better camera. Might vary depending on the UAS you're using. The UAS that fit into this category tend to be a little easier to fly than this little guy here. And the reason is they have stabilizers in them, which make them incredibly easy to fly, right? The cameras are a little better, and some of them, depending on which one you're getting, might have that return to home feature, which is really nice to have. So the next grade up would be the prosumer or top grade. This would be, again, DJI, has, 80-90% of the market? 75% of the market. Unique flyby copters. These guys are like $80 to $800 to $600. We have 2 sitting here on the table. We have a Mavic Pro, and we also have a Phantom 4, right? over here. So the weight of these tend to be 3 to 10 pounds. They'll fly up to 27 minutes, depending on weather. If it's really cold, it might be less. 3.1 miles is their flight range, and they'll fly about 58 miles per hour. These guys here, they tend to be really stable to fly, have much better cameras on them. They'll have that return home, but what's even cooler about these guys is a lot of them will have the ability to set like a geofence or flight path where you could just, program the UAS and press a button and off it goes and it'll go fly your flight plan. So very interesting stuff. But again, they get a little more expensive depending on what you're doing. The last category would be the commercial and or industrial. These guys are the ones usually used for something like filmmakers would use them. They're far more expensive, way much, much more. Because of their weight, the flight time is diminished some because they actually weigh more, and their range is diminished some, and they're slower. However, they offer the ability to, say, a filmmaker that the other UAS won't, and that is that you can buy the UAS, and then you can pick and choose the components that you're adding onto it. You can pick the camera that you want, or the other components like Lume cubes or whatever, or not. So that's how those work, where you kind of buy the UAS. It's more of like a basic model and then add your picked components on. All right? So the big thing you need to know before you take a UAS up in the air is it something you need to register? So the rule is, and if you decide you're going to go take your exam, they will ask you in one way or another what the guidelines are for registering a UAS. And here it is. If your UAS weighs between 0.55 and 55 pounds, you must register it with the FAA. So this little guy, we don't need to register him. He doesn't weigh enough. But our Mavic Pro, our Phantom 4, all need to be registered, and they are. We have a unique H520 at home, also registered. So when you're looking at registering your UAS, there are two ways to register it, and we're going to talk about those in just a sec after we talk about what happens if you don't register it. So in today's day and age, it took the FAA a little while to figure everything out, right? Drones are hitting the market. They're becoming more and more affordable. So more and more people are buying them, and more of them are ending up in the sky, right? So the FAA has really put together a really comprehensive plan to keep our airways safe, right? And like I said earlier, it is every pilot's obligation to know and abide by those rules that the FAA has set forth. Because the risk of flying a UAS inappropriately, like that guy who hit the Black Hawk helicopter, people can die. This is a big deal. So just know that if you're not going to follow the FAA's rules, there are consequences should you get caught, and they are expensive and or imprisonment. So you really want to make sure that you verse yourself in what the rules are, follow the rules, and you are good to go. All right? I even recommend that even if you are a recreational pilot, it's still a good idea to know all of this, because it can only make you better at flying, operating, following the rules, and then helping other people learn the rules and follow the rules as well. All right, so I'm going to go over this way fast because I know we were mostly talking about the commercial and the 107, but I'm going to put this part in here so we have a good jumping off place before you fly. So the first way that you can register a UAS with the FAA, because there are two, is the special rule for model aircraft, which is Section 336. Registering your UAS under this category is for hobby and recreation only. All right? So the rules of doing it this way are that you will follow a community-based safety guideline and fly within the programming of a nationwide community-based organization. I have a slide about what that is, so we'll talk about that in a second. You will fly a model aircraft under 55 pounds. Remember, we discussed the 0.55 to 55 pounds, unless certified by a community-based organization. If you're in a community-based organization and you're flying UAS that weigh 60 pounds, you can still register them, although you can't do it online. It's a paper application, so the process is a little longer. But it's still possible. Registering online is obviously way easier and under 55. Fly within visual line of sight, so you'll always have your UAS in line of sight. You'll never fly in your other aircraft. You will notify an airport and air traffic control prior to flying within 5 miles of an airport. That is every airport. And you will never fly near emergency response efforts. So again, if you are going to register your UAS under this Section 336, it is only for hobby and or recreational purposes only. So just for the fun of it, put a big period at the end of that. Registration costs $5 for 3 years, which is almost nothing. And you must mark your drone with your FAA registration number, which we have done here. So I don't know if you guys can see, but on our Phantom, we have our registration number labeled right here. We have our phone number below it just in case, but that's how we stuck ours on. You can use a Sharpie if you want. It all works. And the last thing is that you must follow the FAA's rules and regulations and or community-based guidelines and fly within the programming of a nationwide community-based organization. If you would like more information about that, I actually put up a little web address down here. So I'll just give you guys a second if you were interested in writing that down. And if you don't get it down, I can go back to it at the end so you can catch it then too. All right? All right, so I'm going to move on. And if you didn't get it all, then just let me know at the end and I'll go back for you. Okay, so pretty basically what a nationwide community-based organization is. So way back in the day, like when I was a kid, people would fly remote control airplanes. My dad did it. My brothers did it with my dad. It was a thing that our families was always big into aviation. So over time, when drones kind of hit the market, they decided that the definition of a drone was something that was operated remotely, right? A vehicle operated remotely. Well, all those radio controlled planes ended up getting scooped up into that drone definition. And so while the FAA needs to ensure that the airspace is safe, they also recognize that, golly gee, there's been people that have been operating these remote control radio or remote control aircraft, airplanes, for fun and for hobby for 50 years. So what they did was they allowed that group to continue operating under the rules they have always operated under. And that is through a nationwide community-based organization such as the Academy of Model Aeronautics. So if you want to kind of look at it like the Academy of Model Aeronautics kind of is almost like a little protected class of recreational use drones. And so they might have drones or aircraft that weigh more than 55 pounds. They might fly at night. They might, go faster than the 100 miles an hour. They might do things like that, but they're protected because they're part of this organization and the FAA recognizes that they're just having fun and they've been doing it for a really long time. So that's what all that's all about. And then outside of that, you're going to follow all their rules for recreational vehicles. Okay? So there's some pictures of some guys with their modeling aircrafts. All right? So the second way to register your drone, and that is the small UAS Part 107, which is what you guys are mostly interested in. This, if you register your UAS under this, you are actually flying commercially or recreationally. It actually encompasses both. All right, so we're going to talk about what commercial use is. If you register a UAS under this Part 107, you must get your remote pilot certification with the FAA. You must get your remote pilot certification. Your drone, again, will weigh under 55 pounds. You will always keep that UAS within your line of sight. That is your naked eye or corrective lenses like glasses, but binoculars don't count. First person view goggles don't count. It has to be within line of sight. You will never fly near other aircraft or over people. You will never fly in controlled airspace or near airports without FAA permission, and you will only fly during the daytime. Now, if you look at this slide, you'll notice asterisks sitting after a few of these things like visual line of sight, flying over people. Those are there because those items are waiverable, and we're going to talk about waivers a little bit later on. So I just wanted you to put that in your head that there are some, we're going to talk about waivers in a minute, but if you don't have a waiver, you got to follow these rules, okay? So again, small UAS Part 107, if you are unable to fit into that recreational category, which is not a very big category, right? It's all for fun, only for fun. So if you're ever doing anything that is commercial, or you're taking video and putting it up online and you're getting like pay-per-click advertising, you are no longer recreational, fitting into that recreational category. However, you will, as part of your 107, you can fly in G airspace at or under 100 miles an hour. You'll yield the right of way to manned aircraft. You will not fly directly over people, and you will not fly from a moving vehicle unless in a sparsely populated area. And again, all waiverable if you notice a little asterisk at the end of them. And the biggest takeaway from this is that if you're registering your UAS in that commercial registration, you must get your Part 107 remote pilot certification. All right, so a little, what is considered the commercial use UAS? You literally can buy a regular recreational UAS like what we have, that Mavic Pro, that Phantom 4. Those are considered recreational use drones. We use them commercially, so they are commercial, registered commercially. We have to have our licenses, which we do. All right, so it can be any recreationally sold or commercial use UAS used for commercial purposes. So to fit in that category, you could be, say, a real estate agent taking pictures for yourself, for your listings. But when those properties sell and you earn money, that makes you a commercial pilot. You're earning money off the pictures. A farmer using aerial mapping or photography to view crops and fence lines, commercial. He's a commercial pilot. A UAS pilot paid in money, products, or services for any aspect of their operation. If you are using a UAS as part of your job, you're a police officer, you're an engineer, and you use a UAS to look at bridges or cell towers, or that's all commercial, all right? So it's really important to understand where you fit in as a commercial pilot. If it's anything having to do with a job or anything where you will make money, it's commercial. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what that test is, okay? So pretty much the certification that you need to get if you're registering your UAS under that commercial tab, it's called the Part 107 certification, 14 CFR Part 107 certification. Some people call it the remote pilot certification. And pretty much what it is it's a test. It's the FAA calls it a demonstration of knowledge. You demonstrate by taking a test. And the test covers all the aspects that the FAA feels you are going to need to know as a remote pilot so that you can safely operate your UAS here in the United States. So that test covers applicable regulations, safety, airspace, weather, emergency procedures, crew resource management, radio communications, the psychological effects of drugs and alcohol, aeronautical decision-making and judgment, airport operations, UAS maintenance, and pre-flight inspection procedures. All right? In order to take this exam, you must be at least 16 years old. You must be able to read, speak, and write and understand English, although they do make adjustments for like hearing impaired. You must be in physical and mental condition to safely operate a small UAS. You have to pass that aeronautical exam. And If you are an existing pilot who has passed the Part 61, you actually can just go online and take a little like training course and then apply for your license. The FAA recognizes that if you are a commercial pilot or a private pilot private pilot, that you actually already know all this material and you probably know more than a remote pilot knows. So what they allow you to just take a little training course and then apply for your license. All right. So that's the only person or people that don't have to go take that remote pilot certification. So about the test, we hear about the test all the time. We've heard from people who have passed it with flying colors. We've heard of people that have not passed it. I will tell you that there are principles that you need to know, and there's information that you need to be comfortable with. If you are comfortable with the information that the FAA wants you to know, you can go into that test and you can sit down, and no matter what question comes up in front of you, you can answer it because you'll have the ability to work it out, right? What we hear is the people that don't pass are the people, for the most part, that don't take it seriously. Like the FAA says, you need to know about weather, or maybe you need to know about METARs, how to read a METAR. And somebody's like, I don't really need to know that. I can just go look at the weather outside. And then they get on the test and they might have 3 questions about METARs, and then they don't know how to read one. And so you want to make sure, I would say overwhelmingly, that all the areas that the FAA says that you should know, all the information that you should know, they want you to know it. And so you should. And the more confident and comfortable you are figuring things out, like reading aeronautical charts, the better off you are. All right? So the test itself, it's all multiple choice. And each question has 3 option answers. So that's actually pretty good. So 3, right? Each question can be answered by a single response, meaning they don't ever do the A and B, B and C. They don't do that. All of the above, none of the above. It's one correct answer per question. Each question on the test is independent of all the other questions. You'll never have a question and then have 2 follow-up questions after it. That doesn't happen. They're all independent. You do need to get a 70 to pass. There are 60 questions on the test in total, and you are allowed 2 hours to complete the test. Now, I was going to tell you something, and I just jumped out of my head. The cost to take the test is $150, and should you not pass, it's 14 days before you can retest. Now, about when you go take the test, all right? When you walk in and you sit down and your examiner turns the computer on for you and you're all set and you're ready to go, you will see that there's like a list off on the left, and it has like your 60 questions. And when you answer a question and save it, a little red light turns to green so you can see that you answered that. You don't have to do them all in order. So in other words, you're rolling along and maybe question 10, you're like, man, I'm so unsure about it. Skip it, roll on, do the other ones. You can go back. Sometimes you get to the end and you're like, wow, I answered those 60 questions. And then you go back to that one you were unsure about, and all of a sudden you got it, you know it. So you're good to go, right? So I just, that actually is a really good aspect about the test, that you don't have to do them in order, which really helps like knock down the nerves level a little. All right. So again, what the test covers. So aeronautical charts, airspace, airport communication, pilot judgment and decision making, aircraft loading, weather, METARs are huge, right? So once you take the test and you pass it, so just if you're interested in taking it, what happens is you apply online, you go take your test, right? You go down, you have to bring your driver's license with you. It has to have your correct address on it. You need to not go with anything. You'll read on the FAA's website that you can bring like a simple functioning calculator with you. I brought a simple functioning calculator with me, and they said, nope, you can't have that. You can't take it in. They wouldn't even let me bring my own pencil in. They gave me a piece of paper and a pencil and a calculator, and I used their stuff. So you kind of got to be a little flexible with all of that. I think some places might do it differently. You absolutely will not be able to bring your phone in and use a calculator on that. I say err on the side of being prepared. So bring your own calculator. And then if they give you one, if it's like me and they want you to use theirs, that's fine. But if they don't, at least you have one, right? So you want to make sure you're prepared when you get there. 2 hours is actually a really long time. Most of the people that I know that have taken the test pretty much have it done within an hour. For the most part, but you do get 2 hours to do it, So if you're prepared, you should be able to go in there and probably knock it out in about an hour, I would say, and then you will find out right then and there whether or not you passed your test. So when you're finished and you click done, it'll pop up and tell you how you did. Instantly, you'll know. Then what happens is your testing site will print out a certification for you, and it will have a number on it. You need to wait a couple days, and then you're going to log on to the FAA site, and you're going to go and apply for your license. And so you go apply for your license, you put that little number in. The FAA takes all that information. They do a little background check on you, make sure that you're all cool and stuff. And then once they've done their little due diligence, they're going to send you your license. I want to say it probably takes 2 months. You'll get a temporary paper license, but I think it takes them about 2 months or so before they'll actually send you your actual license in the mail. And then the license is good for 2 years, and then you're going to have to go test again. The next time you test, it's the same 60 questions, but you only get 90 minutes to take it, and it's still $150. So I think they expect you to just be able to pull it off a little faster, right? So what being a certified Part 107 remote pilot and command means, it means that you may freely use your UAS as part of your work, business, or monetary earning hobby. You are a legal remote pilot. It's easier to insure your drone, your UAS, with that Part 107 license. When you go to insure your UAS, that is one of the first questions they ask. Do you have your license? Our insurance, I think, had the license and a 50-hour minimum. They wanted to know that you had flown it for 50 hours minimum, I think is where our insurance company was. You will understand the how, why, where, when, and when to operate your UAS. You may absolutely apply for waivers and authorizations, which I have a couple slides about, and you will now be a link in the chain of airspace safety, which is huge because there are still a lot of people out there that don't know the rules and don't know you just can't purchase a drone and send it on up in the air and do whatever you want. So now you can be that person that helps other people understand the rules, and we can all move forward. So a little bit about waivers. As I said before, in order to apply for a waiver, you have to have the Part 107. There's two things. There's waivers and there's authorizations. So just so we can differentiate a little, authorizations are a one-time shot at being able to operate outside some of the rules set forth by the FAA. So authorizations are a one event, one time, yes, you can do this. And waivers, on the other hand, are a consistent ability to be able to operate outside some of the rules set forth by the FAA. We at Aerobotics, we actually have our nighttime waiver. The process I have on this slide can take up to 90 days. Sometimes that's a question on your test. How long do waivers take? The answer is 90 days, up to 90 days. And I think that's probably about what ours did take. So waivers are really complicated to fill out. They're time consuming to fill out, and the FAA is looking for particular things when you apply for a waiver. And the biggest thing that they want to know is that you can operate your UAS safely in the manner set forth in your waiver. So when we say we wanted to fly ours at night, what we did was we said, hey, you let us operate our UAS at night, and here's what we're going to do to make sure we're super extra safe. One of the things that we do is we'll always have a visual observer when we operate our UAS at night, and that was part of our waiver. So to be extra safe. I mean, there were other things too, but that was like one of the big ticket ones. So most commonly requested waivers are to fly at night, flying over people, flying from a moving vehicle, not in a sparsely populated area, flying multiple aircrafts with only one pilot, flying beyond line of sight, above 400 feet. And then lastly is flying within a controlled airspace. So no, once you get your license, if you're a real estate agent, you're going to want to probably get on this LANCE or air maps that I'm going to describe to you in a second. So what ended up happening was you cannot operate your UAS within 5 miles of an airport, right? So I don't know where all you guys are from, but out here in Springfield, we have an airport, right? So we have a couple airports, but our bigger one, you can't operate within 5 miles of that airport. So the FAA started getting all these applications for waivers. Oh, I need to fly near an airport. I need to fly near an airport. And each one takes 90 days. So if you were a real estate agent and somebody listed a property with you and that property happened to be within 5 miles of an airport, but you can't take pictures of that property for 90 days till you get your waiver or your authorization, that's just not conducive to doing a good job. So the FAA recognized that, and what they ended up doing was they made this thing called LANCE. And LANCE, it stands for Low Altitude Authorization and Notification Capability. And so what that means is that, like our airport out here, I think it's Class C, right? The Springfield Airport is Class C. So Class C airspace kind of looks like it hits the ground, it goes up, then it goes out and goes up higher, right? So what's underneath this part here, right, is technically within the 5 miles, but it's not technically Class B airspace, but it's within 5 miles of an airport. So what ended up happening, like let's say you were a real estate agent and you wanted to take photographs within 4.5 miles of an airport. So now you can log on to this LANCE. We use the app on our phone called AirMap to do this. So now it's an app you can put on your phone, right? And you can log on to that and we can say, okay, we want to operate within 5 miles of Springfield Airport. And what we're going to do is we're only going to fly like 100 feet. That's going to be our max, a low altitude, 100 feet. So we're going to be flying underneath that Class B or C airspace, okay? So AirMap goes, yeah, they can fly there. If they only go 100 feet, that's good. So you put in the date you're going to fly, how long you're going to fly, like the hours range that you're going to be flying, and how, all the information. And then they can give you an instant okay. And as long as you stick within the guidelines of that instant LANCE waiver, you're good to go. And then that actually helps people who need to get authorizations to fly within 5 miles of an airport a little quicker. All right, so a little bit more about waivers and, the process to go online. There's a website here, which if you need it at the end, I can come back and get that for you. Again, another little slide about the FAA. They put together this little card about what you need to know before you fly your drone. However, what's not on here is that you need to get it registered, and if you're operating it commercially, you'll need to have a license. So that's not on here. We did that 80% of all aviation errors are human errors. And so overall, the big ticket item rules, which I stuck here at the end just to kind of hit them up one more time, is that you will be needing to register your UAS. You will always fly at or below 400 feet. And mind you, all of these questions can be on your exam. You need to keep your UAS within line of sight. You need to be aware of airspace restrictions, respect privacy, never fly near other aircraft or airports, never fly over people, public events, or stadiums, never fly near emergencies such as fires or hurricanes, and never, ever, ever, ever fly under the influence of drugs or alcohol. All right. There was one other thing that I wanted to share with you that I actually missed. I remember what it is now. When you go to take your test, the FAA has a question pool. And I am pretty sure their question pool is about 400 questions, but they are constantly updating it as new rules become available. They're making new questions. So their pool is growing, right? When you go take your test, your question, you're going to get 60 questions. All right. Well, they always try and make sure that you get a certain amount having to do with the rules and a certain percentage having to do with the weather and a certain percentage having to do with, the METARs and other aspects. That pool is so large that if two people went in to take the test at the same time, they literally could have no two questions that are the same. My test could be 100% different from the person sitting next to me's test. So it's really good to make sure that you understand all the concepts, and when you're studying for the test, just not memorize answers, but understand the way the questions are laid out and how to figure the answer out. All right? So pretty much, we are having a class on the 6th and 7th from 8 a.m. to 4:30. It's a test prep course, and we go over absolutely everything in the class. There is, we have multiple practice exams. So we have practice exams for each section of, that we cover, weather or METARs. Each section has a practice exam, and then we have a comprehensive exam at the end, which it's like 100 questions long, which I know is more than the 60 you're going to expect on the test, but I'm a fan of better safe than sorry and better being prepared. I always like to be overly prepared. And so we're doing that. And I put on here that if you register for the class here at MSU, if you type the word maker into the discount or coupon code, it'll give you a $100. It's $100 off if you type that in. And so you guys can do that. And next, we have questions and answers. So Cody's going to open this up. And if you guys have any questions, even if it's regarding I don't care what the question is, ask it. We want to answer. All right. We can hear you. Do you guys have any questions?
Will we be able to have a recorded version of this sent to us?
Cody is nodding yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Do you guys have any questions? Do you have any questions about the test or anything you need to know?
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you great.
Okay. I had just taken a class here recently. We were talking about there's even so when you look at the maps, you've got your shelves, be the surface to, 3,000 feet, et cetera, whatever it is. They were talking about, and they didn't go back over, is there an actual general airspace kind of heights? They said something about what caught my eye or caught my ear when they said it was, they said class D is 2,500 AGL.
Yeah.
Is there something for class A, B, C, and E as well?
Well, all airspace starts at above ground level, right? So the AGL is above ground level. But I will tell you that all airspace is built and catered to the area. So they're all different. They're all even shaped different. Like if you ever go look at Chicago, O'Hare Airport, that is, they're all a little different. So right. You really have to when you're doing that on the exam, they'll give you a chart. So if they ask you about airspace they might ask you what category of airspace it is, which you'll be able to tell by looking at an aeronautical chart, right? On what the ring is, right? Or sometimes they'll say, what's the height? And so you can look on an air chart. They'll always give you the chart to go with the question because they're all just a little different.
Okay, so there's not a rough general height then, correct?
Yeah, they're all pretty much a little different.
Heights, but the radius can change considerably. And the only part of anybody's worried about that's flying a UAS, you've got to remember
the ceiling. Yeah.
Ceiling, no matter what.
Can you hear him?
So they're always worried just about that crew or that 100 foot, 200
Right.
foot, 300 foot, 400 foot.
Mhm.
To make sure that you're staying
Below.
upside down wedding cake
Right.
shape.
So, but I mean, realistically, the airspace on charts is always, it depends on how big the airport is.
Some of them will go from ground
Yep.
level, some of them will be class G, and they'll say that it's not. Some of them,
What's the one out at Gimlin?
they'll have airspace restrictions only if there is a manned 24-hour
Tower. Right.
And if there's not, then the restrictions don't apply
Right.
whenever the tower is not manned.
Right.
So that's where learning to read the charts comes in. All that information's in the key. And all the
Yeah.
charts.
Can you hear him okay?
Barely. I can make out here and there.
It's pretty like they'll give you charts. So when you go to take your test, they'll give you the supplement book. You don't bring it with you. They have one there. And so some of your questions might say, figure 25, area 3. And so you just have to open it up, find figure 25, find area 3, and then look at the airspace. And all the heights, the ceilings, they're all on there. The ceilings and floors are all listed on the air charts. So you should be okay if you're,
So there won't be any questions that say, class, D general ceiling height is,
Yeah, I never saw a question like that ever. And I will tell you, since you're talking about like the heights of ceilings and floors, when you're looking at more complicated airports, you really want to make sure that sometimes the lines get so like confusing, and it might ask you what the ceiling is or what the floor is at a little tiny airport that maybe sits within the 5-mile radius of a larger airport. And so you got to really like make sure, sometimes you got to find that little airport that's sitting within the the 5-mile radius of that big airport. And sometimes you have to go like fishing around to find the numbers that state what the ceiling and floor is. So you really got to be like careful when you're like following that back to be able to find the number. I found that to be like, I had practiced that a lot. I would like take different aeronautical charts. They're all listed online, and I would just kind of like go through and just follow through just to make sure I understood exactly how that worked really well.
Okay.
So, all right.
The main thing is that he knows that whenever you're flying your UAS, that you're always going to mainly be concerned with class G.
Right.
That's going to be your biggest concern, because that's going to be the only thing that's going to be the levels at
400 feet. My husband's off saying that in Class G airspace, obviously 400 feet's your height, right? So, and they do ask you that a bunch of times on the exam as well. There are certain questions that they ask you about. There's a bunch of questions that they ask you regarding like responsibility, in this situation, who is responsible? The remote pilot in command, because if you have the remote pilot in command, a visual observer, someone operating the controls, the remote pilot is the person ultimately responsible. There's a lot of questions on that aspect of it, knowing that there are those 5 worrisome attitudes that you have, like, machoism, impulsivity. They'll ask you questions on that. Guaranteed you'll have at least one question on that for sure. Airspace, weather, they ask you a lot of questions on like the stages of a thunderstorm. You want to make sure you know all of that. The different stages, like which one's the most downpour, all that stuff. If, after this, you're getting ready to take your test?
Yeah, I'm going to try to get it scheduled and have it done hopefully next couple of weeks.
Okay. So if in your study time you end up that you have a question, don't hesitate to give us a call. And then, we'd be more than happy to like answer any questions that you have and, help you out, because it's $150 and we want to see you pass.
Right.
So, so if you end up like unsure about anything, just ask. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? I think that might be it. I think that might be it.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for coming, you guys. And I'll give you our work number real fast. It's 417-366-0422. Our email address is aeroboticsllc@gmail.com. And again, if you guys have any questions, just give us a call, okay?
Will
All right. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.